started on the first night of winter, just after the first real snow had blanketed everything in white. I was getting ready for bed, just doing my usual routine, when I glanced out my bedroom window, and that's when I saw him. A man, standing at the very edge of my yard, right where the weak glow of the streetlight meets the darkness. He was dressed in a long black coat, the kind you don't really see anymore, and wore an old-fashioned brimmed hat that cast his face completely in shadow. He was just standing there, facing my house, hands hanging limply at his sides, utterly and completely still. I stared, my breath catching in my throat. I waited for him to move, to continue on his way, maybe cut through the yard, but he didn't. He just stood there, a silent statue against the falling snow. My heart started pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I tried to rationalize it. It had to be a trick of the light, a weirdly shaped bush covered in snow, or maybe one of the neighbors playing some kind of bizarre prank. I kept watching, but nothing changed. Finally, feeling a deep unease I couldn't shake, I yanked the curtains closed and tried to force myself to sleep, telling myself he'd be gone by morning. But the next night he was back. Same spot, same coat, same eerie, unnerving stillness. I found myself drawn to the window again, this time peering from behind the edge of the curtain, like a kid spying on something they shouldn't be seeing. I watched as fresh snow began to dust his shoulders, but he never shivered, never once shifted his weight. He just stood there, this silent sentinel, staring at my house. Another day passed, and then another. It became a horrifying ritual. Every night, as the clock struck midnight, he would just appear. He never got any closer, but he never left either. He never waved, never called out, never gave any sign that he was even real, besides the fact that he was undeniably there. On the third night, my nerve broke. I couldn't take it anymore. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. The police came, their powerful flashlights cutting beams through the darkness, sweeping across the yard. They found footprints in the snow, a single set leading to the spot where he stood. But they led from nowhere, and they led to nowhere. They just started, and then they stopped. The officers looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. Of course, when they arrived, the man was gone. They spoke to my neighbors, but no one else had seen him. The whispers started. I was just imagining things, maybe stressed out, maybe lonely. They left, and I was alone again, the silence in the house feeling heavier than ever. My life started to unravel. Sleep became a distant memory. Instead of my bed, my nights were spent in a chair by the window, a prisoner in my own home, waiting for my warden to appear. The watching became a two-way street. Sometimes, in the faint light, I could have sworn his head tilted just slightly, as if he was tracking my movements as I paced from the living room to the kitchen. My friends, tired of my frantic late-night calls about the man in the yard, started letting my calls go to voicemail. At work, my boss pulled me aside, his face etched with concern, pointing out the dark, bruised circles under my eyes and the way I'd flinch and jump at every sudden noise. The world was shrinking, and the only thing that felt real was him. One morning, after another sleepless vigil, I stumbled to the window, ready to face the empty grey dawn. But there was something new. A message traced in the delicate frost on the outside of the glass. The letters were shaky, almost childlike. It said, "I see you too." A cold dread, sharper and more terrifying than anything I'd felt before, shot through me. Panic set in. That afternoon, I went out and bought the thickest blackout curtains I could find. I was determined to shut him out, to create a fortress of darkness in my own home. But even with the windows covered, I could feel him. It was a pressure, a psychic weight pressing against the walls, a cold that had nothing to do with the winter outside, seeping into my very bones. For 6 nights, I lived in my self-imposed darkness, refusing to look out. But on the 7th night, something compelled me. I don't know why, but I crept to the window and peeled back a tiny corner of the curtain. He was there, but something was different. His posture had changed. Slowly, with a terrifying, deliberate motion, he raised his arm. His hand was gloved, and his finger was pointing directly at the house. At my window, at me. I stumbled back, my heart feeling like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. In that exact moment, my phone, which had been silent on the counter, rang. The caller ID was just a string of zeros. I hesitated, then answered. A crackling, static-filled whisper hissed through the speaker. "Come outside!" I screamed and threw the phone across the room. I wasn't going anywhere. I ran through the house, frantically checking every lock on every door, every latch on every window. The only place I felt remotely safe was the small guest bathroom, the one room with no windows, no view of the yard. I locked myself in, slid down to the floor, and sat there in the dark, listening to the sound of my own ragged breathing for what felt like hours. I must have eventually passed out from sheer exhaustion. When I woke up, sunlight was filtering under the door. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I cautiously opened the door and stepped out. And then I saw them. Muddy footprints, leading from the back door, right into the center of the living room carpet. They stopped abruptly in the middle of the floor, as if the person who made them had simply walked into thin air. I was beyond desperate. There was only one person left to call. My mother. I begged her, my voice cracking, to tell me about the house. If anything strange had ever happened here before my family bought it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thin and shaky. "There was a man," she said softly. "The old owner, before we moved in. His wife and daughter. They just disappeared one day, gone without a trace. After that, he changed. People in the neighborhood said he would just stand in the yard, night after night, staring at the house. They said he was waiting for them to come back, too." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then one night, he vanished too. They searched everywhere. They never found him." After the call, a strange calm settled over me. The story, as terrifying as it was, felt like an answer. An ending. Tonight, I stood at the window, pulling back the curtain without fear. The yard was empty. The snow was undisturbed, pure white under the glow of the streetlight. For the first time in what feels like a lifetime, I felt a wave of relief, a sense of safety. The watching was over. I turned away from the window, a small, tired smile on my face. But as I turned, I caught my own reflection in the dark glass of the window pane. And standing there in the reflection, right behind me, just over my shoulder in the hallway of my own home, was a shadowy figure, utterly still. He never moves.